Picture this. You wake in the middle of the night. Complete darkness. Your bedroom, so familiar in daylight, has become alien territory. You can barely make out the edge of your dresser. The doorway is just a darker shadow against darkness. Your heart rate ticks up slightly, that ancient discomfort with being blind. Now imagine your cat in that same room. To her, it's practically daylight. She can see your face clearly, every detail of the furniture, the texture of the carpet. She's navigating with perfect confidence through what you experience as near total blindness. The cat can see in light 6 times dimmer than what you require. Behind her retina sits a structure called the Tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer that bounces light back through the eye a second time, effectively doubling the available illumination. It's why their eyes glow in photographs. It's why they own the night. You don't have that structure. Your eyes contain only about 120 million rod cells, the photoreceptors responsible for low-light vision. Some nocturnal animals have over 1 billion. And here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't always our story. Roughly 200 million years ago, during the age of dinosaurs, our distant mammalian ancestors were almost certainly nocturnal creatures. They had to be. The dinosaurs ruled the daylight hours. Our primordial relatives survived by becoming creatures of darkness, with excellent night vision encoded into their very biology. For millions of years, the mammalian line was defined by its ability to see in the dark. But somewhere along our evolutionary journey, we traded that ability away. We gave up the night. The evidence is written in our eyes, in the structure of our retinas, in the missing tapetum lucidum that our ancestors once possessed. The question is simple, but the answer reveals something profound about what it means to be human. What did we trade our night vision for, and why? Whether you're in Tokyo watching the first light of dawn, London settling into your lunch hour, or Los Angeles deep in the midnight quiet, welcome. This is a place for curious minds exploring together. Drop a comment with your city and time. There's something comforting about knowing we're scattered across the globe, all wondering about the same ancient mystery. If this kind of exploration speaks to you, consider subscribing. We're building a community of people who find peace in questions rather than easy answers. Now let's travel back to understand what our eyes have forgotten. Picture this. It's 200 million years ago, in what we now call the Triassic period. The sun sets over a landscape that would be utterly alien to you. The continents are still fused together into the supercontinent Pangaea. The air is thick, humid, oxygen-rich, and as darkness falls, the world transforms. The dinosaurs that dominated the daylight hours have retreated to their nests. The massive sauropods, the swift bipedal predators, the armored herbivores, they've all settled into whatever passes for sleep in their reptilian brains. The daytime world belongs to them, unquestionably. They are the success story of the Mesozoic era, the undisputed masters of every ecological niche that matters. But as the last light fades, something else emerges. From beneath a fallen log, a creature no bigger than your thumb ventures out. It's covered in primitive fur, its body temperature regulated internally rather than by the sun. Its eyes are enormous relative to its skull, dark and gleaming. This is Morganucodon, one of the earliest true mammals, and it has been waiting all day for this moment. For the safety of darkness. This tiny animal, weighing perhaps 30 grams, is your ancestor. And for the next 160 million years, creatures like it would define what it meant to be a mammal. They would be small, they would be vulnerable, and above all, they would be nocturnal. Think about that number for a moment. 160 million years. To put that in perspective, the entire span of human existence, from our divergence from other apes to today, covers maybe 6 or 7 million years. The age of dinosaurs lasted more than 20 times longer than that. For 20 times the entire history of the human lineage, our mammalian ancestors lived in the shadows. This is the nocturnal bottleneck, and it shaped everything about what we would become. Here's the thing. When we talk about evolutionary pressure, we often think about competition for food or mates. But sometimes the most profound evolutionary pressure is simply this: don't get eaten. And during the Mesozoic era, the most effective strategy for not getting eaten was to be active when the dinosaurs weren't. The dinosaurs were, with very few exceptions, diurnal creatures. They hunted, fed, and moved during daylight hours. Their visual systems were optimized for bright light. Their metabolisms, their behaviors, their entire ecological strategy was built around the sun. They owned the day completely. So mammals went the other direction. They became creatures of twilight and darkness. And over millions upon millions of years, this nocturnal lifestyle drove extraordinary adaptations in mammalian eyes. Consider for a moment what it takes to see in near total darkness. Your eyes need to capture every available photon of light. They need to amplify faint signals. They need to distinguish shapes and movements in conditions where there's barely enough light to register anything at all. Mammalian eyes evolved to do exactly that. They developed rod cells in staggering numbers, photoreceptors so sensitive they can theoretically detect a single photon. They evolved larger pupils that could dilate wide to gather maximum light. They developed the tapetum lucidum, that reflective layer behind the retina that bounces light back through the photoreceptors a second time, effectively doubling the eye's sensitivity. But here's what's really fascinating. We have the genetic evidence for all of this. Written into the DNA of modern mammals is the story of this nocturnal past. In the early 2000s, researchers studying mammalian eye evolution began piecing together something remarkable. They looked at the genes responsible for vision across different mammalian species. They compared these genes to those in reptiles and birds, and they found something unexpected. The ancestral mammals, the ones that gave rise to all modern mammalian lineages, had genes for 4 different types of cone cells. Cone cells are the photoreceptors responsible for color vision. 4 types of cones would have given these ancient creatures the ability to see a rich spectrum of colors, probably including ultraviolet light. But somewhere during those 160 million years of nocturnal existence, most mammalian lineages lost 2 of those 4 cone types. They kept only 2. And with only 2 types of cone cells, you can't see the full spectrum of colors. Your color vision becomes limited, dichromatic rather than tetrachromatic. Why would evolution eliminate perfectly good genes for color vision? The answer is simple. If you're nocturnal, color doesn't matter. There isn't enough light for color vision to work anyway. What matters is sensitivity to dim light, the ability to detect movement and shapes in near darkness. So the genetic machinery for complex color vision gradually degraded. Those genes mutated, became non-functional, or were repurposed for other tasks. The evidence is still there in our genome. Like fossils embedded in stone, we have the remnants of those lost cone cell genes. They're called pseudogenes now, broken copies of genes that once worked but no longer code for functional proteins. They're the genetic scars of our nocturnal past. Most mammals today still carry this legacy. Dogs, cats, horses, elephants, most primates, they all have dichromatic vision. They see the world in what we might describe as something like blues and yellows, without the rich reds and greens that some of us humans can perceive. They're still living, in a sense, in that nocturnal world that shaped their ancestors. And this is where our story takes an unexpected turn, because humans are different. We're among the exceptions. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we need to understand just how complete this nocturnal bottleneck was. How thoroughly it shaped the mammalian body plan. Look at the fossil record from the Mesozoic era. The mammals from this period, the ones we found preserved in stone, are almost universally small. Morganucodon, which we mentioned earlier, weighed about 30 grams. Hadrocodium, another early mammal from about 195 million years ago, had a skull just 12 millimeters long. Its entire body probably weighed less than 2 grams, about the weight of a paperclip. Even the largest mammals from the age of dinosaurs rarely exceeded the size of a modern badger. Repinomus, one of the biggest, lived about 125 million years ago and weighed perhaps 15 kilograms. That's impressive for a Mesozoic mammal, but it's still smaller than most dogs. Why so small? Because being small is an advantage when you're nocturnal. Small bodies need less food. They can hide more easily. They can exploit ecological niches that larger animals can't access. A creature the size of a shrew can live quite comfortably in the spaces between the roots of trees, in the cracks of rocks, in burrows too small for predators to follow. And small bodies can be supported by insect prey. The Mesozoic night was rich with insects. beetles and early moths, and primitive cockroaches. A tiny mammal could sustain itself on these creatures, hunting them by scent and sound and those extraordinary night-adapted eyes. The fossil evidence paints a picture of remarkable consistency. For 160 million years from the late Triassic through the entire Jurassic and most of the Cretaceous period, mammals remained small, nocturnal, and marginal. They were successful in their own way. Yes, they survived. They diversified into various forms. But they never challenged the dinosaurs' dominance. They never broke out of their ecological box. Until 66 million years ago, when everything changed. The asteroid that struck Earth at Chicxulub, off the coast of what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, was approximately 10 kilometers in diameter. It hit with the force of billions of nuclear weapons. The impact created a crater 150 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep. It ejected trillions of tons of rock and dust into the atmosphere. Within hours, massive tsunamis swept across the world's oceans. Within days, the dust and debris in the atmosphere began blocking sunlight. Within months, global temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis stopped. Plants died. The herbivores that depended on those plants starved. The carnivores that depended on those herbivores followed them into extinction. The dinosaurs, those masters of the daylight world, were catastrophically vulnerable to this disruption. Their ecological strategies, refined over 160 million years of dominance, were suddenly liabilities. They needed sunlight. They needed the plants that sunlight sustained. They needed the complex food webs that connected them to their environment, and they needed warmth. Most dinosaurs, despite some species possibly having primitive feathers, were still fundamentally dependent on external heat sources. When the sun disappeared behind a veil of debris, when global temperatures dropped, they had no buffer, no insulation, no internal furnace to keep them going. But the mammals did. Those tiny nocturnal creatures had spent 160 million years adapting to scarcity. They were already accustomed to long periods without food. Their fur provided insulation. Their internal temperature regulation meant they could function in cold conditions. And most importantly, they didn't depend on sunlight. They were creatures of darkness already. The impact winter that killed the dinosaurs was just a slightly longer night. Within 200,000 years of the asteroid impact, something extraordinary began happening. The fossil record shows an explosion of mammalian diversity. Suddenly, mammals weren't all small and shrew-like. They began diversifying into larger forms. They began occupying ecological niches that had been closed to them for their entire evolutionary history. They began emerging into the daylight. For the first time in 160 million years, it was safe to be a diurnal mammal. The predators that had confined them to the night were gone. The competitors that had monopolized the productive daylight hours were gone. The world was suddenly open, empty, full of opportunity. But here's what makes this moment so profound, so pivotal to understanding our own visual system. Those mammals that ventured into the daylight were still carrying the legacy of their nocturnal past. Their eyes were optimized for darkness. Their visual systems were built for a world of shadows and dim starlight, and now they were stepping into the sun. Think about what that means. Evolution doesn't start with a blank slate. It can only modify what already exists. Those early mammals emerging into daylight niches didn't have dinosaur eyes. They had mammalian eyes, shaped by 160 million years of nocturnal selection pressure. The genetic evidence shows us exactly what happened next, and it's one of the most remarkable stories in evolutionary biology. Different mammalian lineages, faced with the new opportunities and challenges of diurnal life, began solving the problem in different ways. Some lineages, like most modern mammals, stayed primarily nocturnal or crepuscular. They kept the visual adaptations that had served them so well. Cats, dogs, rodents, most hoofed mammals, they're still creatures of twilight and darkness at heart. They retained their two types of cone cells, their rod-dominated retinas, their tapetum lucidum. But one lineage, the one that would eventually give rise to primates, took a different path. And that path would eventually lead to us, standing here 66 million years later, trying to understand what our ancestors gave up and what they gained. The primates, or more precisely, the ancestors of primates, were among the mammals that committed most fully to diurnal life. They became tree-dwelling creatures, leaping between branches, foraging for fruit and leaves in the forest canopy. And in that environment, the old nocturnal adaptations were suddenly less useful than new ones. But we're not quite there yet. Before we can understand what primates gained, we need to fully appreciate what the nocturnal bottleneck had taken away. The loss of those two cone cell types wasn't just about seeing fewer colors. It represented a fundamental reorganization of the mammalian visual system. During those 160 million years in the shadows, mammalian brains had been rewired to prioritize motion detection over color perception. They'd been optimized to spot predators in low light, to track moving prey, to navigate by starlight and moonlight. The neural architecture in mammalian brains, the visual cortex, and the pathways that process visual information, all of this had been shaped by the demands of nocturnal life. Mammals developed extraordinary abilities to see in dim light, to detect subtle movements, to navigate complex three-dimensional spaces with minimal visual information. But they'd lost something too. That rich four-color vision of their ancestors was gone. The ability to distinguish subtle variations in color, to see the world in its full chromatic complexity, had been sacrificed on the altar of night vision. Most mammals still live with that trade-off today. They see better in the dark than we do. They have that tapetum lucidum, reflecting light back through their retinas. They have more rod cells, more sensitivity to dim light, but they see a muted world, limited in its color palette. And for 160 million years, that was the mammalian condition. Excellent night vision, limited color perception. It was the price of survival in a world dominated by dinosaurs. Until the dinosaurs were gone. Picture the world 65 million years ago, just a few 100,000 years after the impact. The dust has settled. The sun shines again on a transformed planet. The forests are recovering, new plants spreading across landscapes stripped bare by the impact winter. And in those forests, small mammals are beginning to venture out in daylight. They're still cautious. Millions of years of nocturnal behavior don't disappear overnight. But gradually, generation by generation, some lineages are spending more time active during the day. They're discovering that the daylight world offers resources that the night doesn't. Fruit that's easier to find in bright light. Leaves that are more nutritious when you can see which ones are freshest. Insects that are active during the day, and they're discovering something else. In the bright light of day, those old nocturnal eyes aren't quite adequate anymore. The tapetum lucidum that was so useful in darkness becomes a liability in bright light, causing glare and reducing visual acuity. The rod-dominated retina that could detect the faintest movements in twilight is overwhelmed by the intensity of direct sunlight. Evolution, as always, begins to respond. But it's working with the tools available, the genetic legacy of 160 million years of nocturnal adaptation. It can't simply recreate the four-cone visual system of the ancestral mammals. Those genes are gone, degraded, non-functional. But it can tinker, it can modify, it can find new solutions to the challenge of seeing in bright light. And this is where the story of human vision really begins. Not with our primate ancestors gaining something new, but with them recovering something that had been lost. Not innovation, but restoration. Not progress, but reclamation. The dinosaurs are gone. The long night is over. For the first time in 160 million years, our mammalian ancestors can safely venture into daylight. The world is full of opportunity, full of resources, full of ecological niches waiting to be filled. But that opportunity comes with a cost. To truly thrive in the daylight, these emerging mammals will need to reinvent their visual systems. They'll need to find a way to see colors again, to navigate a bright world, to exploit resources that require more sophisticated color vision. Some lineages will make that transition. Others won't. And the choices made in those early millions of years after the dinosaur extinction will echo forward through deep time, shaping the eyes we have today. The nocturnal bottleneck had been broken, but its legacy remained, written in the structure of mammalian eyes, in the organization of mammalian brains, in the very genes that code for vision. Our ancestors were free to enter the daylight world, but they were entering it with eyes designed for darkness. Picture yourself standing in a tropical forest at dawn. The canopy above you is 100 shades of green. But now, close your eyes and imagine that same scene with a crucial difference. All those greens look identical to you. The bright lime of new leaves, the deep emerald of mature foliage, the yellow-green of leaves about to fall, they're all the same flat color. And that ripe mango hanging from a branch 20 feet above you? It's invisible against the leaves, same color, same shade, indistinguishable. This was the world that early primates inherited from their mammalian ancestors, a world of limited color, where the vibrant spectrum we take for granted simply didn't exist. Most mammals today still live in this world. Your dog sees it, your horse sees it. They have dichromatic vision, meaning they have just 2 types of color-sensing cone cells in their eyes, instead of the 3 that you possess. To understand what dichromatic vision actually means, think about human colorblindness. About 8% of men and 0.5% of women have what's called red-green colorblindness. They can't distinguish between certain reds and greens because they're missing 1 type of cone cell. The world looks different to them, but not dramatically so. They adapt, they function perfectly well. And for most of Earth's mammals, this is simply normal vision. But here's where it gets interesting. Somewhere between 30 and 40 million years ago, in the ancestors of Old World primates, the lineage that would eventually lead to apes and humans, something remarkable happened. A gene duplicated. Not the whole genome, just one specific gene. The gene that coded for 1 type of cone cell copied itself, and that copy began to mutate, to drift, to change. Over millions of years, that duplicated gene evolved to respond to a different wavelength of light. And just like that, trichromatic vision was born. Think about what that means. A random copying error in DNA, the kind of mistake that happens occasionally in every species, gave our ancestors the ability to see a color that had been invisible to mammals for 160 million years. Red came back into the world. Not the red that our distant pre-mammalian ancestors had seen before the age of dinosaurs, but a new red, reconstructed through a different genetic pathway. The answer lies in something we rarely consider. Color vision isn't just about seeing pretty sunsets. It's about survival. It's about finding food. And in the tropical forests where early primates were evolving, that 3rd color receptor opened up an entirely new way of seeing the world. Imagine you're a small primate in a forest canopy 35 million years ago. You're hungry. Around you are thousands of leaves, and hidden among those leaves are fruits at various stages of ripeness. Some are green and unripe, bitter and possibly toxic. Some are perfectly ripe, sweet and nutritious. Some are overripe, beginning to ferment. To a dichromatic animal, they all blend together into the same greenish background. Finding ripe fruit is a matter of random searching, of touching and tasting until you get lucky. But with trichromatic vision, the ripe fruits suddenly pop out from the background. That yellow-orange mango stands out against the green leaves like a beacon. That red fig becomes immediately visible. You can scan the canopy and instantly identify which trees have ripe fruit and which don't. You can spot a single ripe berry among hundreds of unripe ones from 20 feet away. The studies on this are striking. Researchers have tested both trichromatic and dichromatic primates. Some New World monkeys have variable color vision, with some individuals having 3 cone types and others having only 2 in fruit-finding tasks. The trichromatic individuals are significantly better at locating ripe fruit. Not slightly better. Significantly better. They find food faster, waste less energy searching, and can afford to be more selective about what they eat. But fruit detection is only part of the story. Here's something that should fascinate you. The same genetic adaptation that allowed primates to see ripe fruit also gave them the ability to detect something far more subtle and far more important for a social species. They could now see changes in skin color, the flush of blood to the face, the pallor of illness or fear, the subtle color shifts that indicate emotion, health, arousal, aggression. Human skin is unique among primates in being relatively hairless, and there's an ongoing debate about when and why we lost our body hair. But one consequence is undeniable. Our naked skin becomes a display surface, a canvas on which our blood flow paints constantly changing patterns. When you're embarrassed, blood rushes to your face and you blush. When you're scared, blood drains from your skin and you go pale. When you're healthy, your skin has a warm tone. When you're sick, It takes on a grayish or yellowish cast. But none of this would matter if we couldn't see it. The dichromatic animal can't detect these subtle shifts. The wavelengths of light reflected by oxygenated blood versus deoxygenated blood, by healthy skin versus sick skin, require trichromatic vision to distinguish. Think about that for a moment. The same adaptation that helped our ancestors find ripe fruit also gave them the ability to read each other's emotional and physical states through skin color. It turned the surface of our bodies into a communication system. We didn't need to develop elaborate color patterns like many animals do, because our existing skin, when exposed, already provided all the color signaling we needed. This is what makes primate color vision so remarkable. It wasn't just about seeing more colors for their own sake. It was about unlocking new sources of information. Visual information about food. Visual information about each other. Information that could mean the difference between eating well or going hungry, between recognizing a sick individual who should be avoided and a healthy potential mate. But every adaptation comes with a cost. Your eyes contain approximately 6 million cone cells. These are the photoreceptors responsible for color vision and fine detail in bright light. They're concentrated in a small area called the fovea, right at the center of your visual field. When you look directly at something, you're aiming your fovea at it, bringing your cone cells to bear. But your eyes also contain about 120 million rod cells. These are the photoreceptors responsible for vision in low light. They're spread across your entire retina, but they're almost entirely absent from the fovea. Rods can't detect color, but they're exquisitely sensitive to light. A single rod cell can detect a single photon. They're what allow you to see anything at all in dim conditions. The ratio tells the story. You have 20 times more rod cells than cone cells. But compare that to the ratio in other mammals. A cat has proportionally many more rods. A mouse has even more. The trend is clear. As primates evolved better color vision, they sacrificed rod cells to make room for more cone cells. They restructured their retinas, devoting more neural real estate to color processing and less to low light sensitivity. It's not just about the number of cells, it's about the supporting architecture. Color vision requires more complex neural processing. The signals from 3 different types of cone cells have to be compared and integrated. The brain regions devoted to color processing are substantial. All of that neural machinery has to be built and maintained, and it comes at the expense of other systems. The trade-off becomes even clearer when you look at primates that didn't make it. Tarsiers are small primates, distant relatives of ours that remained nocturnal. They never evolved trichromatic vision. Instead, they went in the opposite direction. Their eyes are enormous, up to 16 millimeters in diameter in a skull the size of a human fist. If your eyes were proportionally as large, they'd be the size of grapefruits. Tarsier eyes are so big they can't move in their sockets. The animal has to turn its entire head to look around, which it can do through 180 degrees in either direction. And those huge eyes are packed almost entirely with rod cells. Tarsiers have virtually no cone cells at all. They've sacrificed color vision almost completely in favor of the ability to see in near total darkness. They can hunt insects by starlight. They can navigate through the forest canopy on moonless nights. They own the darkness in a way that we never could. But they can barely see color. The world to a tarsier is mostly shades of gray, and they're solitary animals, not social ones. They don't need to read facial expressions or detect subtle emotional cues. They don't need to spot ripe fruit against green leaves. They need to see in the dark, and their eyes are perfectly adapted for that single purpose. We made the opposite choice. Our ancestors chose the day over the night, color over darkness, social complexity over solitary efficiency. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Not all primates made this transition equally. Old world primates, the monkeys and apes of Africa and Asia, including our own lineage, all have trichromatic vision. The gene duplication happened once in our common ancestor, and all of us inherited it. But New World monkeys, the primates of Central and South America, tell a more complicated story. Some New World monkey species have trichromatic vision. Others don't. And in some species, only the females have 3 types of cone cells, while males have only 2. This is because in these species the genes for two of the cone types are located on the X chromosome. Females have two X chromosomes, so they can have different versions of the gene on each chromosome, giving them 3 cone types total. Males have only one X chromosome, so they can only have 2 cone types. This creates a fascinating situation. In a troop of howler monkeys, the females can see colors that the males can't. The females can spot ripe fruit more easily. They can detect subtle color variations that are invisible to the males. And studies have shown that in these species, females often lead the group to feeding sites. They're better at finding food because they can literally see things the males cannot. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't always march in a straight line towards some optimal solution. Different lineages find different answers to the same problems. New World monkeys evolved some degree of color vision independently from Old World primates, but they did it through a different genetic mechanism, and the result is more variable, more complicated, more dependent on sex. And then there's the question of what was lost in the transition. About 8% of men and 0.5% of women have red-green color blindness. They're missing one functional type of cone cell, usually due to a mutation in the gene on the X chromosome. This is why it's more common in men. They only have one X chromosome, so a single mutated gene is enough to cause color blindness. Women need mutations on both X chromosomes to be colorblind, which is much rarer. But here's what's fascinating. People with red-green color blindness aren't disabled in any meaningful sense. They adapt perfectly well. Some studies have even suggested they might be better at detecting certain types of camouflage, better at seeing through visual noise to detect patterns. Their dichromatic vision isn't inferior, it's just different. And it's a window into our past. Red-green colorblind individuals see the world approximately as our mammalian ancestors did for 160 million years. They see the world as most mammals still do today. They're not missing something that animals are supposed to have. They're simply retaining an older version of mammalian vision, the version that served our ancestors perfectly well for millions of years. This raises an uncomfortable question. If dichromatic vision is adequate, if animals with 2 cone types survive and thrive, why did we bother evolving a third? What's so valuable about seeing red that it was worth the cost? The answer becomes clearer when you think about the specific ecological niche that primates occupied. Most mammals are either primarily nocturnal, or they're large enough that they can forage on the ground. They don't need to see subtle color differences in fruit because they're not primarily frugivorous, or they can use smell and touch to assess ripeness. But primates were evolving as small diurnal, arboreal frugivores. Small enough that they needed high-energy food like ripe fruit. Diurnal enough that they were active when color vision actually works. Arboreal enough that they were living in the canopy where fruit is found. And increasingly social, living in groups where reading each other's emotional and physical states became crucial. For that specific combination of traits, trichromatic vision was transformative. It didn't just make life slightly easier. It opened up an entirely new way of exploiting the forest environment. It made fruit that had been difficult to find suddenly obvious. It made social communication through facial expressions and skin color possible. It created feedback loops where better color vision selected for more complex social behavior, which selected for even better color vision. But it meant giving up the night. Picture a primate 30 million years ago, just after the gene duplication that created trichromatic vision. It's evening, and the sun is setting. This individual can see colors that its parents couldn't quite see. Reds are more vivid. The contrast between ripe fruit and green leaves is sharper. During the day, this is a huge advantage. But as darkness falls, the individual's vision fails faster than its parents' vision did. Those extra cone cells, so useful in daylight, are useless in darkness. The neural processing devoted to color vision is processing nothing. The retinal real estate devoted to cones could have been filled with rods instead. Generation by generation, as trichromatic vision became more sophisticated, night vision became less so. The trade-off was gradual, but it was inexorable. Better day vision meant worse night vision. More color sensitivity meant less light sensitivity. The ability to see red fruit meant the inability to hunt effectively at dusk. And so our ancestors became increasingly diurnal, not by choice, but by necessity. Their eyes were adapting to daylight, and that adaptation made them progressively less capable in darkness. They were locking themselves into a diurnal lifestyle, burning bridges back to the nocturnal world that their ancestors had inhabited. The evidence is written in our retinas, in the ratio of cones to rods, in the size of our pupils, which can dilate to let in more light, but not nearly as much as a cat's pupils can. In the absence of the tapetum lucidum, that reflective layer by retina that we lost long ago. In the structure of our fovea, packed with cones at the expense of rods. We are, in a very real sense, animals designed for daylight. Our eyes work best in bright conditions. Our color vision is most acute in full sun. When darkness falls, we become clumsy, uncertain, vulnerable. We've retained enough night vision to navigate by moonlight, to see shapes and movements in twilight. But we've lost the ability to truly own the darkness the way our distant ancestors did. And most of us never think about this. We flip on a light switch, and the darkness disappears. We've technologically solved the problem that our biology created. We've used fire and electricity to extend the day, to push back the night, to create a world where our poor night vision doesn't matter. But for millions of years, before fire, before technology, our ancestors lived with the consequences of this trade-off. They had to find safe sleeping spots before darkness fell. They had to avoid predators that could see in conditions where they were nearly blind. They had to organize their entire lives around the rhythm of daylight and darkness, not because they chose to, but because their eyes demanded it. The world they saw, though, was richer than any mammal had seen in 160 million years. They saw red flowers against green leaves. They saw the yellow and orange of ripe fruit. They saw the flush of anger on a companion's face, the pallor of fear, the healthy glow of a potential mate. They saw each other in ways that no other mammal could. And perhaps that's the key to understanding this trade-off. Primates are social animals. Humans are among the most social animals on Earth. Our survival has never depended primarily on individual prowess, but on our ability to cooperate, to communicate, to read each other's intentions and emotions. Color vision gave us a new channel for that communication. It turned our faces and bodies into display surfaces. It made possible a level of visual social signaling that other mammals simply don't have. When you blush with embarrassment, you're using a communication system that required trichromatic vision to evolve. When you notice that someone looks pale and ask if they're feeling okay, you're using visual processing that wouldn't be possible with dichromatic vision. When you make eye contact with someone across a room and read their emotional state from the subtle color of their face, you're benefiting from that gene duplication 30 to 40 million years ago. The trade-off, then, wasn't just night vision for fruit detection. It was solitude for society. It was individual nocturnal hunting for collective diurnal foraging. It was the ability to hide in darkness for the ability to see and be seen by others in daylight. And once that trade-off was made, there was no going back. The genetic changes that created trichromatic vision couldn't simply be reversed. The neural architecture that processed color information couldn't be repurposed for low-light vision without losing the color vision. Evolution doesn't work backwards. It can only move forward, building on what came before, locked into the consequences of past adaptations. So here we are, millions of years later, with eyes that are marvels of color processing but mediocre at seeing in darkness. Eyes that can distinguish millions of different colors but struggle in twilight. Eyes that are perfectly adapted for the world we've created with artificial lighting, but poorly adapted for the natural world our ancestors inhabited. And yet, would we trade it back? Would you give up your ability to see red, to see the full spectrum of colors, to read the emotions on another person's face, in exchange for the ability to see clearly at night? Would you accept a world of muted colors, where sunsets were less vivid and faces were harder to read, if it meant you could navigate confidently in darkness? Most of us would probably say no. We've grown so accustomed to color vision that we can't imagine life without it. The idea of seeing the world in the limited palette of dichromatic vision feels like a loss, even though it's actually the ancestral condition, the way most mammals see. But that's because we're judging from our current perspective, with our current adaptations in our current environment. To our ancestors making this transition, it might not have felt like a choice at all. It was simply evolution doing what evolution does, responding to selection pressures, favoring traits that increased survival and reproduction, slowly reshaping biology over millions of years. The primates that developed better color vision found more food. They had more offspring. They passed on their genes. Generation by generation, the population shifted toward trichromatic vision. And as they did, they shifted away from nocturnality. Not because they decided to, but because their eyes were making that decision for them. Color vision gave primates an edge in the forest canopy. It made them more efficient foragers, better at finding the high-energy foods they needed. It made them more sophisticated social creatures, capable of reading subtle cues in each other's appearance. It opened up ecological niches that had been inaccessible to dichromatic mammals. But it offered something even more valuable for a social species: the ability to read each other, to see not just bodies but emotional states, to detect not just movement but meaning, to turn the simple act of looking at another individual into a rich exchange of information. And that ability, more than anything else, would shape the future of primate evolution and set the stage for the emergence of creatures who would eventually wonder about their own origins, who would study their own eyes, who would try to understand why they can't see in the dark. Picture yourself in a quiet moment with someone you care about. You're sitting across from them, perhaps over coffee, perhaps in comfortable silence. And then something shifts. Their cheeks flush slightly. The skin around their eyes tightens just a fraction. You notice, without consciously thinking about it, that they're looking not at you, but slightly past you, at something over your shoulder. And in that instant, without a word being spoken, you know something has changed. You've read their emotional state, tracked their attention, detected a subtle physiological response that tells you more than language could convey. This is where the story becomes personal, because what just happened in that moment is something no other species on Earth can do quite the way we do it. You used your eyes not to scan for predators or search for food, but to read another human being, to decode the complex signals written in skin tone, eye direction, and facial expression. You used vision not for individual survival, but for social connection. And here's what's really fascinating. This ability, this exquisitely refined capacity to read faces and emotions, is one of the primary reasons you can't see well in the dark. The trade-off we explored earlier, the exchange of night vision for color vision, wasn't ultimately about finding ripe fruit. That was just the beginning. The real evolutionary pressure, the force that truly locked our species into diurnal existence, was the need to see each other, to understand each other, to connect. Look at your own eyes in a mirror. Notice the white parts, the sclera that surrounds your iris. Now think about every other primate you've ever seen. Chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, monkeys of every variety. Their eyes appear dark, almost entirely brown or black. You can see their iris, but the sclera is either darkly pigmented or hidden by their eyelids. When you look at a chimpanzee's face, you can't easily tell where they're looking. But when you look at a human face, you know immediately. The direction of their gaze is obvious, unmistakable. Those white sclera act like arrows, pointing toward whatever has captured their attention. We are the only primates with highly visible white sclera. The only ones. And this isn't an accident of evolution, some random mutation that happened to stick around. This is an adaptation, carefully refined over millions of years, that serves a very specific purpose. It allows others to track our gaze direction. Think about what that means. At some point in our evolutionary history, there was selection pressure for eyes that broadcast our attention to others, not eyes that concealed where we were looking, which might seem advantageous if you're trying to deceive or maintain an advantage, but eyes that openly advertised our focus, our interest, our attention. The cooperative eye hypothesis, proposed by researchers studying human evolution, suggests that visible sclera evolved to facilitate cooperation and communication. In a species that increasingly relied on collaborative hunting, shared childcare, and complex social coordination, being able to see where others were looking became enormously valuable. If I can tell you're staring at something behind me without you saying a word, I can respond faster. If you can see that I've noticed a threat or an opportunity, we can coordinate our response without vocalization that might alert prey or predators. But this advantage only works in one condition: light. Good, bright daylight illumination. In darkness, those white sclera are useless. You can't see where someone is looking if you can't see their eyes at all. The entire adaptation, this fundamental restructuring of human eye anatomy, is built on the assumption of diurnal existence. We evolved eyes that work for social communication in the same evolutionary moment that we were losing our ability to see in darkness. The two changes are inseparable, and the eyes themselves are just the beginning. Look deeper into the brain, and you find something even more remarkable. Tucked into the temporal lobe, in a region called the fusiform gyrus, there's a specific area of neural tissue called the fusiform face area. This patch of brain, about the size of a blueberry, is specialized for one task above all others: recognizing faces. Not just seeing faces, recognizing them. Distinguishing one face from thousands of others. Detecting subtle variations in expression. Processing the complex geometry of facial features, and extracting meaning from tiny changes in configuration. The fusiform face area exists in other primates, but in humans it's larger, more developed, more densely connected to other brain regions. We've devoted more neural real estate to face processing than any other species. Some estimates suggest that as much as half of our visual processing capacity is dedicated, directly or indirectly, to analyzing faces and facial expressions. House. Think about that for a moment. We have eyes that can distinguish millions of colors, that can detect motion at the periphery of vision, that can focus on objects from inches away to miles distant. And we use roughly half of that sophisticated visual system's processing power to look at each other's faces. This isn't a bug in our neural architecture. It's the primary feature. The thing our visual system was optimized to do. Human infants demonstrate this priority within hours of birth. Before they can focus clearly, before they can reach for objects or track movement smoothly, newborns prefer to look at faces. Show an infant a photograph of a face and a photograph of a scrambled face, with the features rearranged, and even a one-day-old baby will gaze longer at the properly arranged face. They're born with a template, a neural expectation that faces are important, that they're worth paying attention to, that they contain information crucial for survival. And they do. A human face broadcasts an extraordinary amount of information, if you have the right kind of eyes to read it. This is where our color vision becomes something more than a tool for finding food. It becomes a social sense, a way of perceiving the internal states of other people. Here's something you probably haven't thought about. Your skin is translucent. Not transparent, but translucent. Light penetrates the outer layers, bounces off the underlying tissue, and reflects back out. And the color of that reflected light depends, in part, on how much blood is flowing through the capillaries just beneath your skin surface, and how much oxygen that blood is carrying. When you're embarrassed, blood rushes to your face. More blood means more hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is red. Your skin flushes, darkens slightly, takes on a warmer tone. When you're frightened or shocked, blood drains away from your skin surface, redirected to your core and major muscle groups. Your skin pales, takes on a cooler, more ashen tone. When you're angry, blood pressure rises, capillaries dilate, and your face may redden in a different pattern than embarrassment, concentrated more in the forehead and cheeks. These changes are subtle. We're not talking about dramatic color shifts. We're talking about variations of 2% or less in blood oxygenation levels, translated into minute changes in skin tone, and humans can detect them. Studies measuring our ability to perceive skin color changes show that we can reliably detect variations as small as 2% in blood oxygenation. We're not consciously aware we're doing it. You don't look at someone and think, ah yes, their blood oxygenation has decreased by 1.8%, they must be experiencing fear. But you do look at them and feel instinctively that something has changed, that they're uncomfortable, or excited, or unwell. This is what our trichromatic color vision was ultimately refined to detect. Not just red fruit against green leaves, though that was part of it, but red blood beneath pale skin. The subtle chromatic signals that reveal emotional and physiological states. And here's where it gets really interesting. This system only works with certain skin tones. Specifically, it works best with relatively pale, unpigmented skin, where blood color changes are most visible. In populations with darker skin, heavy melanin pigmentation masks these subtle color shifts, making them harder to detect. So you might expect that human evolution would have favored lighter skin tones to maximize the visibility of these emotional signals. And in some populations, that's exactly what happened. But in others, particularly those living in regions with intense sunlight, the protective benefits of melanin against UV damage outweighed the social signaling advantages of pale skin. Evolution made different trade-offs in different environments. But here's what's universal across all human populations, regardless of skin tone. We all have the same visual system, the same trichromatic color vision, the same neural architecture for processing faces and facial expressions. We all have visible white sclera. We all dedicate enormous brain resources to reading faces. The hardware is the same, even if the signals it's reading vary in visibility. Because face reading isn't just about detecting blood flow. It's about processing a symphony of information. The position of eyebrows, the tension around the mouth, the dilation of pupils, the direction of gaze, the symmetry of expression, the timing of movements. A human face can produce thousands of distinct expressions, combinations of muscle movements that convey everything from subtle doubt to overwhelming joy. And we're experts at reading them, not because we study or practice, but because our brains are built for it. The fusiform face area doesn't work alone. It's connected to the amygdala, which processes emotion, to the prefrontal cortex, which handles social reasoning, to the superior temporal sulcus, which processes biological motion, to memory systems that store thousands of individual faces, allowing you to recognize someone you haven't seen in decades from a glimpse of their profile. This is a massive neural investment. And like the visible sclera, like the translucent skin, like the trichromatic color vision, it only pays off under one condition: light. Abundant, bright, daylight illumination. You cannot read facial expressions in darkness. You cannot track gaze direction when you can't see eyes. You cannot detect skin color changes when there's insufficient light for color vision to function. The entire elaborate system of human social vision is predicated on the assumption that we're operating in well-lit environments. And this assumption is so fundamental, so deeply embedded in our biology, that when it's violated, the results can be profound. Consider prosopagnosia, sometimes called face blindness. This condition affects approximately 2.5% of the population. People with prosopagnosia have normal vision, normal intelligence, normal social understanding, but they cannot recognize faces. The fusiform face area doesn't function properly, and faces become meaningless arrangements of features, impossible to distinguish or remember. For people with prosopagnosia, every social interaction is complicated. They can't recognize their own family members by sight. They develop elaborate workarounds, identifying people by voice, gait, clothing, context. And the psychological impact is significant. Humans are so fundamentally social, so dependent on face recognition for normal interaction, that the inability to recognize faces creates a profound sense of disconnection. This tells us something important. Face recognition isn't optional for humans. It's not a nice bonus feature that makes social life more pleasant. It's foundational to our species' way of being in the world. We are creatures who read each other's faces, who communicate through expression and gaze, who build relationships on the ability to recognize and interpret the subtle signals written in each other's features. And perhaps this is what makes us human. Not our intelligence, not our tool use, not our language, though all of these matter, but our ability to look at another person and see not just a body, but a mind. To read emotion in the flush of cheeks, intention in the direction of gaze, character in the lines of a face. Other species communicate, other species cooperate, other species form social bonds, but no other species has evolved a visual system so exquisitely tuned to reading the internal states of conspecifics. No other species has sacrificed so much night vision, invested so much neural processing power, restructured so much anatomy, all in service of being able to look at each other and understand. Consider what this means for our evolutionary history. At some point, our ancestors faced a choice. Not a conscious choice, but an evolutionary one, played out over millions of years through countless small selection pressures. They could maintain their nocturnal adaptations, their excellent low-light vision, their ability to function independently in darkness, or they could optimize for social vision, for face reading, for the kind of sophisticated visual communication that requires bright light and color perception. They chose connection over solitude, day over night, each other over independence. And that choice reverberated through every aspect of human evolution. Because once you're committed to diurnal existence, once your visual system requires good lighting to function socially, you're locked into a particular way of life. You need to be active during the day. You need to rest during the night. You need to find or create shelter that protects you during the hours when your vision fails you. You need eventually to control light itself. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before humans learned to make fire, before they invented artificial lighting, before they transformed the night into something manageable, they had to live with the consequences of their visual system's limitations. They had to be vulnerable in darkness, dependent on daylight, constrained by the very adaptations that made them socially sophisticated. Think about what it must have been like for early humans with eyes optimized for reading faces but poorly adapted for seeing in darkness. Every sunset was a deadline. Every night was a period of vulnerability. The world that was so rich with social information during the day became an alien landscape after dark, full of sounds without sources, movements without shapes, threats that couldn't be assessed because they couldn't be seen. And yet they persisted. They survived. They found ways to cope with their visual limitations. They learned to read the night through other senses, to listen for danger, to move carefully in darkness, to seek shelter and safety when vision failed. They developed cultural practices around the transition from day to night, rituals and routines that acknowledged the fundamental shift in their perceptual world. But they never forgot what they'd lost, or rather, they never knew consciously that they'd lost anything. To them, this was simply how eyes worked, how the world was. They didn't know that their ancestors, millions of years back, had seen the night differently, that other mammals, all around them, were navigating darkness with ease while humans stumbled. They just knew that night was dangerous, that darkness was to be feared, that light was safety, connection, the medium in which human life truly happened. And this knowledge, this deep understanding of their dependence on light, would eventually drive one of the most important technological developments in human history. Because humans, unlike any other species, would not simply accept their visual limitations. They would not resign themselves to being day-active creatures who huddled helplessly in darkness. They would fight back against the night. They would learn to create light, to extend the day, to push back the darkness that their own evolution had made so threatening. They would invent fire and lamps and eventually electric lighting, transforming the human relationship with darkness in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. But that transformation came with costs. And those costs, like the original trade-off that sacrificed night vision for social vision, would ripple forward through time, shaping human civilization, human health, human consciousness itself. The story of human vision is not a simple narrative of progress, of gaining capabilities and expanding possibilities. It's a story of trade-offs, of choosing one path and foreclosing others, of adaptations that solve some problems while creating new ones. We gained the ability to read each other's faces, to communicate through gaze and expression, to build complex social relationships on a foundation of visual understanding. We gained color vision that could detect the subtlest emotional signals, neural architecture that could process faces with extraordinary sophistication, eyes that broadcast our attention to others. And we lost the night. Not just the ability to see in darkness, but the possibility of being nocturnal creatures, of inhabiting the world that belongs to owls and cats and bats. We lost the independence that comes with good low-light vision, the ability to function alone in darkness without fear or vulnerability. We became dependent on light, on each other, on the social world that our visual system was built to navigate. Was it worth it? That's not really a question evolution asks. Evolution doesn't weigh costs and benefits against some abstract standard of value. It simply responds to selection pressures, favoring traits that increase reproductive success in specific environments. Our ancestors who could read faces better, who could track gaze direction, who could detect emotional states through skin color changes, had more offspring. They cooperated more effectively. They formed stronger social bonds. They navigated complex social hierarchies more successfully. Generation by generation, the population shifted toward better social vision and worse night vision. Not because it was better, in some absolute sense, but because it worked. Because in the environments where early humans lived, the advantages of social vision outweighed the disadvantages of poor night vision. But from our modern perspective, with our artificial lighting and our transformed relationship with darkness, we can see both what was gained and what was lost. We can appreciate the extraordinary sophistication of human social vision while recognizing its limitations. We can marvel at the neural complexity that allows us to read a stranger's emotional state from a fleeting expression, while acknowledging that this same system leaves us helpless in darkness. And we can understand that our visual system isn't just a tool for gathering information about the world. It's a social organ, a communication device, a bridge between minds. When you look into someone's eyes, when you read the emotion in their face, when you detect the subtle flush that indicates embarrassment, or the pallor that suggests fear, you're using your eyes the way they were meant to be used. Not to see the world, but to see each other. This is the true legacy of the trade-off our ancestors made millions of years ago. Not just the loss of night vision, though that matters, but the gain of connection. The ability to look at another human being and see not just a body, but a person. To read their internal state, to understand their emotions, to recognize them as an individual distinct from all others. Your eyes became instruments of connection rather than mere survival tools. But this transformation required light, abundant, and reliable. And that requirement would shape human civilization itself, driving the development of technologies and social practices that extended the day, pushed back the night, and ultimately transformed the human relationship with darkness in ways both profound and troubling. Picture this. It's a cool evening on the southern edge of Africa, nearly 1 million years ago. The sun has slipped below the horizon, and the forest is dissolving into shadow. In the distance, a leopard's rasping cough echoes through the trees. The world is becoming dangerous, uncertain, filled with hidden threats that only the creatures of the night can truly see. But here, in the mouth of a shallow cave, Wonderwork Cave to be precise, a small group of early humans is doing something extraordinary. They are gathered around a fire. The flames flicker, painting the stone walls with wavering gold. The air is laced with the scent of wood smoke and roasted meat. And for the first time in the history of our lineage, the darkness has been pushed back not by biology, but by technology. Here's the thing. Our ancestors could not see well in the dark. Their eyes, like yours, were built for color, for subtlety, for the ever-changing light of day. But in the night, their vision failed them. Where other animals slipped silently through the undergrowth, guided by their rod-rich retinas, early humans were nearly blind. They could not trust their senses. The world beyond the reach of the flames was a mystery. But they did not retreat. They did not simply wait for sunrise. Instead, they reached for something new. The power to create light, to shape their environment, to extend the day. And this changed everything. Consider for a moment what this meant. Fire was not just a source of warmth or a tool for cooking. It was a revolution, a technology so powerful, so transformative, that it would fundamentally reshape what it meant to be human. With fire, our ancestors could decide when the day would end. They could choose to gather, to talk, to imagine, long after the sun had vanished. They could make the night their own in a way no other animal could. Let's slow down and really picture that scene. The cave is dark, except for the glow of the hearth. Shadows dance on the walls, transforming stone into living theater. People huddle close to the flames, not just for warmth, but for comfort. The fire is a barrier against predators, a beacon in the wilderness, a gathering point for the community. Here in the circle of light, they are safe. Here, they are together. And this is where the story of human ingenuity truly begins. The mastery of fire is one of our oldest and most profound achievements. Archaeological evidence from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Layers of ash and burned bone, embedded deep within the cave's sediments, shows that our ancestors were deliberately using fire at least 1 million years ago. That number is staggering. For perspective, that's 10 times as far in the past as the first cave paintings, 5 times older than the first stone temples. The timeline is vast. And yet, the traces of those first campfires are still there, silent witnesses to a turning point in the human story. Some researchers argue that the evidence is even older, perhaps 1.5 million years or more, though the debate continues because the signs of ancient fire are subtle, easily erased or misinterpreted. But by 400,000 years ago, the archaeological record becomes clearer. Fire is everywhere. Hearths appear in caves from Spain to Israel to China, their layers of charcoal and scorched earth marking a new kind of human presence. By this time, the use of fire is habitual, woven into the fabric of daily life. But what did fire really mean for these early humans? The answer is complicated. Fire was warmth, yes, a shield against cold nights and biting winds. It was protection too, keeping predators at bay, making the darkness less threatening. But perhaps most importantly, it was a source of light. Picture the world before fire. Night falls, and the world shrinks to the limits of your vision. The forest becomes impenetrable. The cave mouth is a black hole. Conversation ceases. Social life dissolves into silence, interrupted only by the occasional cry or rustle. In this world, the day is all there is. The night is for sleep, or fear, or waiting. And then, with fire, the boundaries change. The day no longer ends with sunset. The hearth burns on, illuminating faces, hands, gestures. People can see each other, can read expressions, can share stories. The fire becomes a stage, and every night is an opportunity for performance, for gossip, for laughter, for dreams. Here's something that should bother you more than it probably does. The extension of the day by even a few hours is not a trivial thing. For most animals, the day is dictated by the sun, and nothing can change that. But humans, with their fires, their torches, their lamps, could choose to ignore the rhythms of nature. They could create time for stories, for planning, for learning, for dreaming. Time that no other animal possessed. And this is what makes the mastery of fire so remarkable. It is not just a technological achievement, it is a social one. The hearth became the first theater, the first classroom, the first parliament. Around the fire, culture was born. Let's look at the evidence. Archaeologists have found clear signs of fire use stretching back at least 1 million years. In Wonderwork Cave, tiny flecks of burned bone and plant material are embedded in layers of sediment, some more than 30 meters from the entrance. A place where only deliberate fire, not wildfires, could have reached. In Israel's Kesem Cave, hearths over 400,000 years old show repeated use, with layers upon layers of ash and charcoal. In France, charred animal bones and blackened stone tools tell the same story, stretching back to the time of the Neanderthals. But fire was not just for warmth or light, it was for cooking. And this, too, changed everything. Here's what's really fascinating. Cooking food fundamentally alters its nutritional value. Raw food, especially raw meat or tough roots, is difficult to digest. The human digestive system is relatively short compared to that of other primates, and our teeth are small, our jaws weak. But when food is cooked, it becomes softer, easier to chew, and most importantly, easier to extract calories from. Studies show that cooking increases the caloric availability of food by 25 to 50%. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between survival and starvation, between a shrinking brain and an expanding one. The human brain is an energy-hungry organ. It makes up just 2% of our body weight, but it consumes about 20% of our calories. That's a staggering metabolic demand, far higher than in any other animal. For our ancestors to support such a brain, they needed dense, reliable sources of calories. Raw food alone would not suffice. Fire and the cooking it made possible provided the answer. Some researchers call this the cooking hypothesis. The idea is simple but profound. The advent of cooking allowed early humans to access more energy from their food, which in turn fueled the growth of their brains. The archaeological record supports this. Around the same time that evidence of habitual fire use becomes common, about 400,000 years ago, there is also a noticeable shift in hominin anatomy. Jaws shrink, Teeth become smaller, guts become shorter, and brains begin to expand. The debate continues, of course. Not everyone agrees that cooking alone drove brain evolution. Some point to meat eating, others to social complexity, still others to climate change. The answer is probably all of the above, but fire was the catalyst, the enabler, the technology that made new forms of life possible. Picture for a moment one of these ancient gatherings. The fire burns low, sending up curls of smoke that drift into the night sky. Children drowse in their mothers' laps. Adults talk quietly, their faces animated by the light. Someone tells a story, a tale of the hunt, or a memory of a lost loved one, or a dream of the world beyond the mountains. The fire crackles, punctuating the silence. This is the birth of culture, of memory, of imagination. And here's where it gets really interesting. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers like the Juhuansi of the Kalahari, observed by anthropologist Polly Wiesner, show a striking pattern. During the day, conversations are practical, economic, focused on the work of survival. But at night, around the fire, the tone changes. People tell stories, share gossip, sing songs, debate ethics, imagine possible futures. The fire becomes a social theater, a space for creativity, for empathy, for the transmission of knowledge. Think about what that means. The extension of the day by firelight did not simply add hours to human life. It created new kinds of life, new ways of being together, new possibilities for connection. The evidence is subtle but compelling. In Wiesner studies, more than 80% of nighttime conversations among the Juhuansi were devoted to storytelling, socializing, and reflection, compared to less than 10% during the day. The fire, it seems, is not just practical. It is psychological. It transforms the way humans relate to each other, the way they think, the way they remember. But fire is not the end of the story. The need for light, the yearning to see, to know, to connect, drove humans to continuous innovation. Torches, made from resinous wood or bundles of reeds, appear in the archaeological record tens of thousands of years ago. They are portable, adaptable, but short-lived. They allow people to move through the dark, to explore caves, to hunt at night. But their light is fleeting, their reach limited. And so the search for better illumination continued. Around 70,000 years ago, something remarkable appears in the archaeological record. The first oil lamps. These are simple, elegant devices, shallow bowls carved from stone or made from hardened clay, filled with animal fat or plant oil, and fitted with a wick. When lit, they burn steadily for hours, casting a soft, persistent glow. The oldest known lamps come from caves in France and Spain, their sooty traces still visible after tens of thousands of years. In some cases, the lamps are decorated with abstract designs, suggesting that even this early, humans were thinking about beauty, about meaning, about ritual. Consider for a moment what an oil lamp meant to its maker. It was a small miracle, a tool that turned darkness into light, uncertainty into possibility. With a lamp, a person could paint on cave walls deep underground, could care for a sick child through the long hours of the night, could gather with others to talk, to plan, to dream. The lamp was more than a tool. It was an invitation to imagine, to create, to hope. And the innovation did not stop there. Over thousands of years, humans invented new ways to hold back the night. Torches gave way to candles made from beeswax or tallow. Lamps became more sophisticated, with glass chimneys and adjustable wicks. In the ancient world, enormous networks of oil trading and candle making grew up to feed the demand for light. In the Roman Empire, for example, hundreds of tons of olive oil were burned every year just to light homes and temples. In China, bamboo and paper lanterns turned the night into a festival of color. In medieval Europe, chandeliers of hundreds of candles illuminated great halls, turning darkness into spectacle. And then, in the 19th century, a new kind of light appeared. Gas lamps, burning coal gas piped through the streets of cities. Suddenly, the night was no longer a barrier to commerce, to entertainment, to public life. The day had been extended yet again, this time not by fire, but by chemistry, by engineering, by the collective will of millions. And finally, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, electricity arrived. The incandescent bulb, invented by Thomas Edison and others, turned night into day for billions of people. Today, the world is ablaze with artificial light, skyscrapers glowing in the darkness, highways marked by rivers of headlights, screens radiating information and entertainment at all hours. The conquest of night is nearly total. But let's return for a moment to that first fire in Wonderwork Cave. The people who gathered there could not have imagined the world we inhabit, a world where darkness is optional, where the boundaries of day and night are blurred, where the rhythms of nature are overlaid by the pulse of technology. And yet, the chain of innovation that began with their simple hearth stretches unbroken to the present. Every lamp, every streetlight, every phone screen is a descendant of those first flames. Here's what's really remarkable. The need for light, born from the loss of night vision, from the vulnerability of darkness, became one of the deepest drivers of human creativity. It shaped our bodies, our brains, our cultures, our dreams. It made us who we are. But how did this transformation actually unfold? Some researchers argue that the mastery of fire was a slow, halting process, marked by false starts and forgotten knowledge. They point to the patchy distribution of early fire sites, to the long gaps in the archaeological record, to the difficulty of distinguishing natural fires from deliberate ones. Others suggest that once fire was tamed, its spread was rapid and inevitable. The advantages were simply too great to ignore. The answer is probably both. In some places, fire was mastered early and became central to life. In others, it remained rare, marginal, always at risk of being lost. The honest answer is that we don't know exactly how our ancestors learned to control fire. Did they stumble upon smoldering logs after a lightning strike and tend the coals for days or weeks? Did they invent friction methods, rubbing sticks together, striking flint against pyrite to create sparks? Did knowledge spread from group to group, carried by migrants or traders or wandering outcasts? The evidence is ambiguous. The mystery remains unsolved. But what we do know is that the technology once acquired changed everything. The hearth became the center of human life. Around it, people gathered not just to eat, but to talk, to share, to imagine. The firelight cast more than shadows. It cast possibility. It cast memory. It cast community. Something subtle but profound was also happening in the brain. The extension of the day by firelight was not just a matter of convenience. It created new rhythms, new patterns of sleep and wakefulness, new opportunities for learning and bonding. Some researchers suggest that the hours spent around the fire, listening to stories, watching faces, imagining possibilities, were crucial for the development of language, of narrative, of self-reflection. The fire became a classroom for the mind. Think about that for a moment. Every evening, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans gathered in the glow of the hearth. They listened to elders recount the deeds of ancestors. They planned hunts, debated ethics, invented myths. Children learned not just practical skills, but values, histories, dreams. The fire was a crucible for culture. And yet, something was lost as well. The darkness, once a space for solitude, for mystery, for the unknown, became less accessible. The deep night, with all its dangers and wonders, was pushed to the margins. In the glow of the fire, humans found each other, but they also lost something of the wildness, the unpredictability, the silence of the night. But that was just the beginning. The mastery of fire set humanity on a path of relentless innovation. The need for light became a kind of obsession, a drive that shaped everything from architecture to religion to science. Temples were built to capture the sun's rays at dawn. Festivals marked the turning of the seasons with bonfires and candles. The invention of writing, another technology born in the flicker of firelight, allowed stories to outlast the tellers, to be carried across generations and continents. The pattern repeats. Every advance in lighting technology brought new possibilities, new dangers, new mysteries. Oil lamps allowed people to explore the depths of caves, to paint the walls with images of animals and spirits. Candles and torches illuminated the great libraries of Alexandria and Baghdad, where scholars pored over manuscripts late into the night. Gas lamps turned cities into engines of industry and invention, but also of pollution and alienation. Electric lights made the world safer, brighter, more connected, but also more restless, more fragmented, more distant from the rhythms of nature. And this is where it gets really strange. The conquest of night, begun with fire, continued with oil and gas and electricity, has not made us less dependent on each other. If anything, it has intensified our need for connection, for community, for meaning. The firelight gatherings of our ancestors are echoed in the glow of screens, in the endless conversations of the digital age, in the search for warmth and comfort in a world that often feels cold and impersonal. But let's not forget the chain of innovation that brought us here. The first spark, the first flame, the first oil lamp, each was a leap into the unknown, an act of imagination, a refusal to accept the limits imposed by biology or by fate. Each was a testament to the human capacity for creativity, for resilience, for hope. Some anthropologists argue that the mastery of fire was the defining event in human evolution, the moment when culture became more important than genes, when technology supplanted biology as the engine of change. Others caution against such sweeping claims, pointing to the evidence of fire use among other animals. Chimpanzees, for example, have been observed harvesting food from wildfires, though they do not make fire themselves. The debate continues, but the magnitude of the change is undeniable. Consider for a moment the scale of the transformation. Before fire, the human day was limited to the hours of sunlight, about 12 hours at the equator, less in the winter farther north or south. After fire, the day could be stretched, sometimes doubled. The possibilities multiplied. Social groups could grow larger, more complex, more cohesive. Information could be shared, innovations passed on, alliances forged. The human world became richer, deeper, more intricate. And the evidence is written not just in bones and ash, but in myth and memory. Nearly every culture has stories about fire, about its origins, its dangers, its gifts. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, Maui snaring the sun, the firebird, the phoenix, the eternal flame. These are not just stories. They are memories of a time when fire was new, when its power was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But what was lost in this great leap forward? The honest answer is, we may never know for certain. Some researchers suggest that the extension of the day by artificial light disrupted natural sleep patterns, leading to new forms of fatigue, anxiety, even disease. Others point to the loss of direct connection with the night sky, with the rhythms of the moon and stars, with the cycles of nature that once governed every aspect of life. There is a kind of nostalgia, a sense of something vanished. Yet what was gained is equally profound. Around the fire, humans became more than individuals. They became communities, cultures, civilizations. They became storytellers, dreamers, inventors. The fire was the catalyst, the hearthstone of humanity. Picture, for a final time, that ancient gathering in Wonderwork Cave. The flames burn low. The night presses close. The world beyond is vast, unknowable, filled with dangers and wonders. But here, in the circle of light, a new kind of life is taking shape. A life defined not by fear of the darkness, but by the power to shape it. A life defined by connection, by creativity, by hope. And this is what makes the story of fire and of artificial light so compelling. It is a story of loss, yes, but also of possibility, of vulnerability, but also of ingenuity, of the limits of biology and the boundlessness of imagination. The need to see in darkness did not vanish with the first fire. It became a driving force, a challenge to be met again and again across continents and millennia. Each new technology, each torch, each lamp, each glowing screen was an answer to the same ancient question. How can we push back the night? The chain of innovation is long, and it is unbroken. From the embers of Wonderwork Cave to the cities of today, each generation has added something new, something remarkable to the story. Each has found ways to make the darkness less frightening, less empty, less final. But fire was just the beginning. The need for light would drive human ingenuity for 1,000,000 years, and it is still driving us now. The screen you might be watching at this very moment is just the latest link in a vast and ancient chain. A chain that began with the loss of night vision, with the vulnerability of our ancestors, with the simple, irrepressible desire to see and be seen. Fire solved the problem of darkness, but it also changed how we sleep, how we dream, how we gather, how we remember. Our lost night vision left other marks on human biology, marks that are still with us, even in the age of artificial light. And the story of those marks, the story of how the conquest of night reshaped our minds and our bodies, is a story still unfolding, still mysterious, still full of wonder. Picture this. You are lying in the darkness, your eyes closed, the faint blue glow of the modern world fading as you drift toward sleep. The hum of distant traffic, the hush of your own breath, the gentle thrum of your heart, these are the sounds that fill your night. But beneath them, deeper and older, there's another rhythm at work. It is the rhythm of your own biology, a cycle as ancient as the first flicker of fire on a cave wall, as constant as the rise and fall of the sun. Here's the thing, as you settle towards sleep tonight, you are repeating a pattern that was set in motion millions of years ago, long before there were cities or clocks or even language. The pattern of when you sleep, how you sleep, and what happens in your mind during those hours of darkness, all of it shaped by the simple fact that, somewhere along the winding path of evolution, our ancestors lost their night vision. Think about that for a moment. Most mammals see at night. Their eyes are built for it. Large pupils, specialized cells in the retina, layers that reflect and amplify whatever faint light the night sky offers. Some primates still retain this power, but not us, not humans, not the great apes either, at least not fully. Our eyes are creatures of the day, built for color and detail and the subtle play of light and shadow in the forest. When the sun goes down, we become vulnerable. And so, over thousands upon thousands of generations, our relationship with darkness changed. What does that mean for the way we sleep? For the dreams that come to us at night? For the cycles of rest and wakefulness that shape our days and our lives? The answer is as haunting as it is illuminating. Our lost night vision did not just close our eyes to the world after sunset, it rewired our bodies, our brains, our very sense of what it means to rest. Let's start with something deceptively simple. How long do you sleep at night? For many people in the modern world, the answer is around 7 to 8 hours, sometimes less, sometimes a little more, but usually falling within that narrow band. It feels almost automatic, almost inevitable, as if this is just what humans do. But compare that to our closest relatives. Gorillas, for instance, can sleep for 12 hours in a single stretch when undisturbed. Chimpanzees and orangutans typically sleep between 9 and 12 hours each night, often broken up by short periods of wakefulness. The numbers are striking. The difference of 2, 3, sometimes even 5 hours between us and the other great apes. Why? What happened in our evolutionary past to make human sleep so short, so efficient, so consolidated? This is what makes human sleep so fascinating. Here's where it gets really interesting. Human sleep is not only shorter than that of other primates, it is also denser. Our nights are filled with proportionally more rapid eye movement sleep, or REM, than any other primate. For us, around 20 to 25% of a typical night is spent in this mysterious stage, where the brain becomes active, dreams unfurl in strange narratives, and the body is temporarily paralyzed. For chimpanzees, for gorillas, for orangutans, the figure hovers closer to 9%. Think about what that means. Fewer hours, but more dreaming. Shorter nights, but richer inner worlds. And perhaps this is why our dreams feel so vivid, so meaningful, so haunted by the landscapes of memory and imagination. The answer is complicated. Some researchers believe that the efficiency of human sleep, the fact that we cram more REM into fewer hours, reflects a kind of evolutionary pressure, a need to get the benefits of sleep without lingering too long in the vulnerability of darkness. Others point to the demands of our waking lives, the need to gather, to hunt, to care for offspring, to socialize, to invent and remember and plan. All of that requires time. Sleep, in this view, becomes a negotiation, a compromise between the needs of the body and the dangers of the night. Picture the world before fire, before artificial light. Night falls, and with it comes a cascade of changes. Vision fades. The world becomes uncertain, full of hidden threats. For a creature with poor night vision, darkness is not just empty, it is dangerous. Predators move in the shadows, rivals and strangers become invisible. Every sound is magnified, every movement is suspect. In this ancient landscape, every hour spent asleep is an hour spent defenseless. The longer you sleep, the greater the risk. And so, over generations, natural selection favors those who can get the most out of sleep in the shortest possible time. Those who consolidate their rest, who sleep deeply and efficiently, who wake refreshed and alert before the dangers of dawn. Those who, in effect, learn to trust the darkness just enough to let go, but not so much as to become careless. The evidence is written in our biology. At the heart of the brain, Nestled deep within the hypothalamus lies a tiny cluster of about 20,000 nerve cells, a structure known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. This is the master clock, the metronome that sets the pace for every cycle in our bodies. It is exquisitely sensitive to light, especially the blue wavelengths that flood the sky in the morning and fade as the sun sets. Here's the fascinating part. The SCN receives direct input from the eyes, not to help us see, but to help us know when to sleep and when to wake. Light enters the eye, strikes specialized cells in the retina called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, and sends a signal straight to the SCN. This signal is strongest for blue light specifically, light in the 460 to 480 nanometer range. It is this precise wavelength that most effectively suppresses the production of melatonin, the hormone that signals to your body that it is time to sleep. Melatonin is a kind of internal sunset. Its production ramps up about 2 hours before your natural sleep onset, preparing your body for rest. In the absence of light, especially blue light, melatonin levels rise, body temperature drops, metabolism slows, and you begin to feel drowsy. The cycle is ancient, precise, and remarkably robust. It is a rhythm that links you not just to your own ancestors, but to every mammal that ever watched the sun slip below the horizon and felt the pull of sleep. But for humans, this rhythm is more rigid, more tightly bound to the presence or absence of light than in almost any other primate. And perhaps this is why our sleep is so consolidated, why we sleep deeply in a single stretch rather than dozing on and off throughout the day and night. Other great apes, free from the same constraints, nap during the day, doze lightly at night, wake and sleep in cycles that are flexible and forgiving. For them, the forest canopy offers protection. Their nests are high in the trees, cradled by branches, buffered by leaves. The darkness is less threatening, the dangers more diffuse. But for our ancestors, ground dwellers, fire makers, social creatures huddling together for warmth and safety, night was a time to be endured, not explored. This brings us to something even more revealing, the way human sleep is organized across the night. For much of recorded history, and in societies untouched by electric light, sleep was not always a single, unbroken stretch. Instead, it came in two phases, what historians and anthropologists call first sleep and second sleep. Picture a village before the advent of gas lamps or glowing screens. The sun sets, people retire to their beds, and a first period of deep sleep begins. This lasts for several hours, perhaps 4, perhaps 5. Then comes a period of quiet wakefulness, often lasting an hour or more. People might talk quietly, pray, make love, reflect on dreams, or simply rest in the darkness. Eventually, the second sleep arrives, carrying them through to dawn. The pattern is documented in diaries, medical texts, and legal records from medieval Europe, and still observed among certain pre-industrial societies today. It suggests that the natural way for humans to sleep is not always the rigid 8-hour block we imagine, but a more flexible, biphasic rhythm, 2 cycles of rest, separated by a gentle interval of wakefulness. But here's what's really fascinating. Even in these societies, total sleep time rarely exceeds 8 hours, sometimes less. In studies of the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of southern Africa, and other hunter-gatherer groups, average nightly sleep hovers between 6 and 7 hours. This is despite the absence of modern distractions, despite the natural darkness, despite the lack of alarms or work schedules. Compare that to the 9, 10, even 12 hours slept by the great apes. The pattern repeats. Human sleep is short, consolidated, and when it comes, remarkably deep. Some researchers think this is a legacy of our vulnerability in darkness. With poor night vision, our ancestors could not risk lingering in the open. Sleep had to be efficient. Others argue that the demands of human society, child-rearing, tool-making, social interaction, simply left less time for sleep. Still others point to the role of fire, which allowed our ancestors to extend the day, but also made them more visible, more exposed, more dependent on one another for safety. The answer, as always, is complicated. It is likely that all of these factors played a role, weaving together to create the unique tapestry of human sleep. But the core of the mystery remains. We are creatures of the day, dreaming in the night, always aware, at some level, of the dangers that darkness holds. There's something profound in this. The way we sleep is not just a matter of biology, but of history. a record of choices made and paths not taken, of adaptations to a world that is no longer ours. Our consolidated sleep, our rich REM dreams, our reliance on light to set our internal clocks, all of it tells the story of a species shaped by the absence of night vision. The consequences ripple outward, touching every aspect of our lives. Because we sleep in a single block, we are able to rise together, to synchronize our days, to build societies that move and act as one. Because our REM sleep is so concentrated, we are able to dream intensely, to process emotions and memories, to rehearse and imagine and create. Because our circadian rhythms are tightly linked to light, we are exquisitely sensitive to the cycles of day and night. But this sensitivity is also a vulnerability, especially in the modern world. Artificial light, particularly the blue wavelengths emitted by screens and LEDs, reaches deep into our brains, confusing the ancient rhythms that once governed our sleep. The SCN cannot distinguish between the light of the sun and the light of a smartphone. To your body, the glowing screen at midnight is a second sunrise, a signal to stay awake, to delay the onset of melatonin, to push sleep further and further into the night. Consider the numbers. Blue light in the 460 to 480 nanometer range is up to twice as effective at suppressing melatonin as warmer orange light. A single hour of screen time before bed can delay melatonin production by as much as 90 minutes. That means the natural rhythm, melatonin rising about 2 hours before sleep, the body cooling, the mind slowing, is disrupted, shifted, made uncertain. The result? Insomnia, fatigue, difficulty waking, a sense of jet lag that never quite lifts. These are not just inconveniences. They are symptoms of a body at war with its own ancient cycles, a mind caught between the requirements of modern life and the demands of evolutionary history. Here's something that should bother you more than it probably does. The very technologies that allowed us to push back the night, to read, to work, to socialize after dark, now threaten to erode the patterns of sleep that made us who we are. The fire that once kept us safe has become the screen that keeps us awake. And yet there is comfort in understanding this. Knowing that your struggles with sleep are not a personal failing, but a legacy of deep evolutionary trade-offs. Knowing that your circadian rhythms, your cycles of alertness and drowsiness, are echoes of a time when the night was dangerous and the day was precious. Knowing that your dreams are more vivid, your sleep more efficient, because your ancestors learned to trust the darkness just enough to let go. Some nights sleep comes easily, other nights it is elusive, flickering at the edges of consciousness like a distant fire. But always, the rhythm persists, the rise and fall of melatonin, the waxing and waning of REM, the dance of the internal clock. The SCN ticks on, marking the hours, measuring the light, guiding you gently through the cycles of rest and wakefulness. There's a kind of poetry in this. The way your body responds to the setting sun, the way your mind drifts into dreaming, the way you awaken with the dawn. It is a cycle that connects you to every human who has ever lived, to every ancestor who ever watched the stars wheel overhead and wondered what lay beyond the darkness. Think about what that means. Every night, as you close your eyes, you are participating in an ancient ritual, a negotiation between vulnerability and trust, between the needs of the body and the dangers of the world. You are sleeping as your ancestors did, shaped by the same pressures, governed by the same rhythms, haunted by the same dreams. And perhaps this is why sleep feels so mysterious, so necessary, so fraught with meaning. It is not just an absence of wakefulness, it is a return to origins, a brief surrender to the rhythms that shaped our species. Some researchers argue that the loss of night vision made us more social, more dependent on one another for safety, that it drove us to gather in groups, to share fire, to tell stories, to dream together. Others suggest that the consolidation of sleep was a response to the dangers of the night, a way to minimize vulnerability, to make the most of the hours we could afford, to let down our guard. Still others point to the role of REM sleep, and wonder if our rich dreams are themselves an adaptation, a way to process the complexities of social life, to rehearse the challenges of the day, to forge creativity and imagination in the crucible of the night. The debate continues because the evidence is ambiguous. We may never know for certain. What we do know is that our sleep is unique. No other primate sleeps as we do. Short, deep, consolidated, filled with dreams. No other primate is as tightly bound to the cycles of light and darkness. No other primate has been as successful at pushing back the night, even as we remain haunted by its mysteries. Consider the implications. In a world without artificial light, the setting of the sun marks the end of activity. Melatonin levels rise, the body prepares for rest. Sleep comes in two phases, with a gentle interval of wakefulness, a time for reflection, for intimacy, for quiet thought. The rhythm is slow, forgiving, attuned to the cycles of nature. In the modern world, the rhythm is broken. Artificial light floods the night, melatonin is suppressed, sleep is delayed, fractured, sometimes lost altogether. The ancient cycle, once so constant, is now a source of struggle and confusion. But there is hope in this understanding. By recognizing the roots of our sleep patterns, we can begin to reclaim them. By dimming the lights before bed, by turning off screens, by allowing melatonin to rise as it was meant to, we can move closer to the rhythms that once governed our ancestors. We can learn to trust the darkness, to let go, to dream. There's something profound in this. The sleep you are drifting toward tonight is not just a personal necessity. It is a thread that connects you to the past, to the choices and losses and adaptations that made you who you are. It is a reminder that you are part of a story far older than yourself. A story written in the cycles of day and night, in the patterns of rest and waking, in the dance of melatonin and REM. When you sleep, you are not alone. You are joined by every human who ever lay down in the darkness, every ancestor who ever trusted the night enough to let go. You are joined by the rhythms of your own biology, by the gentle ticking of the SCN, by the ebb and flow of hormones and memories and dreams. And yet, you are also different. Your sleep is shorter, deeper, more efficient. Your dreams are richer, stranger, more haunted by meaning. You are a creature shaped by the loss of night vision, by the dangers of the dark, by the possibilities of the day. Think about that for a moment. The next time you struggle to fall asleep or wake in the night and wonder why, remember that you are participating in an ancient negotiation, a dialogue between biology and history, between vulnerability and safety, between the needs of the body and the challenges of the world. There is comfort in this. The pattern is not broken, only changed. The cycle is not lost, only transformed. The darkness you settle into tonight is the same darkness your ancestors learned to trust, the same darkness that shaped their dreams, their fears, their hopes. Some questions remain unanswered. Why do we dream as we do? Why is REM so concentrated, so vivid, so necessary? Why do some people thrive on little sleep while others need more? The honest answer is that we don't know. The mystery remains unsolved. But perhaps as you drift towards sleep, you can find peace in the understanding that your rhythms, your cycles, your dreams are part of a story that stretches back through time. A story written in the stars, in the shifting of the seasons, in the flicker of firelight on a cave wall. The sleep you seek tonight is the legacy of countless generations, each one shaped by the loss of night vision, each one negotiating the dangers and wonders of the dark. It is a gift, and a responsibility, and a source of endless fascination. And perhaps this is why the study of sleep feels so intimate, so haunting, so full of meaning. It is not just a scientific puzzle, but a window into who we are and how we came to be. It is a reminder that our bodies carry the memory of ancient nights, of lost visions, of dreams that echo through the ages. So as you close your eyes, as you surrender to the rhythms of your own biology, know that you are participating in something vast, something ancient, something profoundly human. You are not just sleeping. You are remembering. You are trusting. You are dreaming the dreams of a species that once lost the night, and in doing so, found itself. And the story of sleep is not finished. Each night, each dream, each cycle of rest and wakefulness adds another layer to the mystery. The SCN ticks on, the melatonin rises and falls, the REM stage unfolds its vivid narratives. The pattern repeats, generation after generation. There is beauty in this repetition, in the constancy of the cycle, in the way the darkness enfolds you and carries you gently into dreaming. There is comfort in knowing that your struggles and triumphs, your sleepless nights and restful ones, are all part of a larger pattern, a pattern written in the bones of your ancestors, in the structure of your brain, in the dance of light and darkness. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let yourself feel the wonder of it. The peace of surrendering to a rhythm older than history. The gentle unfolding of REM dreams, the slow rise of melatonin, the steady beating of your heart. Let yourself be carried by the cycle, by the pattern, by the story that began with the loss of night vision and continues in every hour of rest. There's something profound in this. The darkness you settle into is not empty, but full of memory, of possibility, of connection. It is the same darkness your ancestors learned to trust, the same darkness in which they dreamed, the same darkness that still shapes your rhythms tonight. And as you drift deeper, remember, our sleep, like our vision, tells the story of our ancestors' choices. It is a story of loss and adaptation, of dreams and dangers, of rhythms that link you to the past and guide you into the future. But what about those who didn't lose their night vision? The exceptions help us understand the rule. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might be thinking, wait, if humans lost their night vision, didn't some of our primate relatives keep it? What about those hauntingly large-eyed creatures that still move through the branches by starlight, untouched by the flood of daylight adaptation that shaped our own evolution? Isn't the story more complicated than a simple trade night for day, solitude for society? It is. The exceptions matter, and they are deeply revealing. Let's look into the shadows. Out there, tucked away in the forests of Southeast Asia and Central and South America, live primates who never surrendered the night. Tarsiers, owl monkeys, slow lorises, and bush babies. They are the living embodiment of a path not taken, a set of evolutionary choices that look, on the surface, like a haunting echo of what we once were. Picture a tarsier in the dark, perched silently on a branch, its fur bristling, its tiny hands gripping the bark. Its eyes dominate its face, enormous, glossy, unblinking. Each eye is quite literally larger than its brain. In fact, relative to body size, tarsiers have the largest eyes of any mammal on Earth. An adult tarsier, weighing only about 120 grams, carries eyes more than 16 millimeters across, each one nearly the same diameter as the animal's skull. But here's what's really fascinating. Those eyes are so large, so rigidly fixed within the skull, that they cannot move at all. If a tarsier wants to look at something, it must turn its entire head, sometimes nearly 180 degrees, an eerie, owl-like motion that seems almost supernatural in the moonlight. Think about what that means. The trade-off is so extreme that the animal's head becomes a camera mount, its vision locked in place so that no scrap of precious starlight is wasted. Why such enormous eyes? The answer is simple and profound. Tarsiers are almost entirely nocturnal hunters, leaping across gaps as wide as 3 meters to snatch insects, lizards, even small birds from the darkness. To do that, they need to gather every available photon, the faintest glimmer of light that filters through the canopy at night. Their retinas are packed with rods, the cells specialized for low-light vision. Color is almost meaningless to them. What matters is seeing in the dark and nothing else. Owl monkeys, sometimes called night monkeys, genus Aotus, offer a different, but equally revealing, example. Of the more than 260 species of monkeys, only the owl monkeys are truly nocturnal. While their eyes are not quite as outsized as the tarsiers, they are still strikingly large, with broad corneas and pupils that can open wide to admit scarce moonlight. And their biology holds another secret. Unlike other monkeys, owl monkeys have a tapetum lucidum-like structure, a reflective layer behind the retina, similar to what you see in cats or dogs, but almost unheard of in primates. This adaptation bounces light back through the photoreceptors, giving the animal a second chance to detect it. It's a clever solution, and a haunting reminder of what was left behind by our own ancestors. But there's a cost. Owl monkeys, for all their cleverness in the dark, have only dichromatic vision, meaning they see with just 2 types of color-detecting cones, rather than the 3 that most diurnal monkeys and humans possess. Their world is painted in muted blues and greens, with little sense of the reds and oranges that fill our days. This is not a world of color, but a world of shadows and movement, where the ability to detect subtle hues is sacrificed for the chance to see it all in darkness. Here's the thing. The trade-off is real and measurable. Biologists have counted the number of rods and cones in the retinas of nocturnal and diurnal primates. In tarsiers and owl monkeys, rods dominate, sometimes outnumbering cones by more than 20 to 1. By comparison, Humans and other day-active primates have far more cones, especially those sensitive to red and green. This isn't just a matter of seeing better at night. It's a fundamental rewiring of the visual system, with profound consequences for behavior and social life. Compare that to what we gained. In our lineage, vision became not just a way to avoid predators or find food, but a social instrument, a way to read faces, detect emotional states, and communicate subtle signals. This shift required color vision, fine acuity, and the ability to process complex facial patterns. But it meant abandoning the night and the solitary vigilance that comes with it. Nocturnal primates show us what we lost and what we might have become. Their social lives are strikingly different. Tarsiers, for example, often live alone or in tiny family groups, rarely more than 2 or 3 animals. Owl monkeys pair up as monogamous couples and raise their young together, but their social groups rarely exceed 4 or 5 individuals. In contrast, many diurnal monkeys live in troops of 20, 40, or even 100 complex societies filled with alliances, hierarchies, and constant negotiation. The pattern repeats. Where night rules, social complexity fades. There is less need for facial recognition, less opportunity for color-based social signaling, less pressure to interpret the subtle cues of a crowded group. The darkness enforces a kind of solitude, a simplicity of interaction, a narrowing of the social world. This is not a deficiency, but a different solution to the same evolutionary puzzle. Some researchers argue that these differences are written not just in eyes, but in brains. The neural circuits for face recognition, color discrimination, and social attention are all less developed in nocturnal primates. Their lives are quieter, more solitary, more attuned to the rustle of leaves and the flicker of moonlight than to the shifting expressions of a rival or the blush of a friend. But that's just the beginning. There are always trade-offs, paths chosen and paths abandoned. The tarsier's night vision is extraordinary, but at the cost of color and social nuance. Our own vision, rich with color and detail, comes with the price of vulnerability and darkness. The exceptions prove the rule. They remind us that evolution is not about perfection, but about negotiation, about balancing the needs of the body, the demands of the environment, and the possibility of social connection. So when you look at a tarsier or an owl monkey, you are seeing an alternative. A path that leads deeper into the night, into a world where solitude is safety and vision is survival. Their eyes are living fossils, records of a time when the night belonged to creatures who chose it, who mastered it, who paid the price for seeing in darkness. Think about that for a moment. What we gained, they lost. What they kept, we abandoned. The story is not one of progress, but of divergence, of parallel experiments, each with its own rewards and regrets. And yet, there is beauty in this diversity, an appreciation for the haunting solitary world of the nocturnal primate and for the vibrant social world we inherited. Satisfaction, too, in understanding the trade-offs that shaped us, and in knowing that, for every path evolution abandoned, another was explored to its fullest extent. Having understood both the rule and its exceptions, we can now appreciate what this trade-off means for us today. Picture this. It's late at night and you're lying in bed, perhaps listening to my voice or watching soft light flicker on the walls of your room. Outside, the city glows. The sky over your neighborhood is not truly dark. It never really is, not anymore. Street lamps cast golden halos on the pavement. Windows and billboards pulse with persistent electric light. Even inside your room, the faint blue glow of a screen, the blinking of a router, the outline of a digital clock, all keep the darkness at bay. You are surrounded by illumination. The darkness your ancestors knew, the kind that pressed in like velvet, complete and absolute, has been pushed to the farthest edges of the world. And this brings us to today. Here, in this world of relentless artificial light, the story of our lost night vision enters its most remarkable and haunting chapter. We are, every one of us, living with the consequences of that ancient trade-off. We have conquered the night so thoroughly that we have almost forgotten there was ever a struggle. But the evidence of our conquest is everywhere, from the way we build our homes and cities, to the fears we carry in our minds, to the subtle, almost invisible scars that modern life traces on our bodies. Let's linger in this moment, in this room, in this small pool of light, because your experience surrounded by soft, Artificial glow is not just the product of modern technology. It is a living fossil, a record of our evolutionary past. Every lamp, every streetlight, every glowing pixel is a monument to the fact that we are a species that cannot see in the dark. But here's what's really fascinating. As much as we've pushed back the darkness, it still shapes us. It still haunts us. In ways both obvious and subtle, the loss of night vision is written into the fabric of our daily lives. Think about this for a moment. Why do so many people feel uneasy in the dark? Why do cities shine so brightly that they can be seen from space? Why do we fill our homes with layers of light, overhead, task, accent, ambient, so that not a single corner is left in shadow? The answer isn't simply convenience or safety. It's deeper, older, more primal. There's a vulnerability to darkness that is hard to shake. For most of human history, the night was dangerous. Our vision, so rich and detailed in daylight, fails us under starlight. We become clumsy, slow, defenseless. Shadows hide threats, predators, rivals, the unknown. Our ancestors learned to fear the dark for good reason. This fear was not irrational, it was adaptive. It kept our lineage alive. Today, that fear lingers. Psychologists call it nyctophobia, the fear of darkness. It is one of the most common phobias, and it doesn't just affect children. Studies suggest that about 11% of adults experience some degree of nyctophobia. That's more than 1 in 10 people living with a shadow of fear that is older than civilization itself. The honest answer is, most of us never truly outgrow it. We just manage it by surrounding ourselves with light. But that's just the beginning. Because fear is only part of the story. The other part is triumph. The other part is adaptation. For thousands of years, humans have experimented with ways to push back the night. The first torches, the oil lamp, the candle, the gaslight, the incandescent bulb. Each invention a little brighter, a little more reliable, a little more available. But the real revolution, the moment when artificial light became universal, came in the 20th century, with the spread of electric lighting. And in the 21st century, with the arrival of LEDs, tiny, efficient, powerful diodes that fill our cities and homes with cold, unwavering glow. Here's something that should bother you more than it probably does. Over 80% of the world's population now lives under light-polluted skies. That is, 4 out of 5 people on Earth cannot experience true darkness, even at midnight, even far from city centers. In Europe and North America, the number climbs even higher. Over 99% of people live with significant artificial sky glow. The evidence is written in satellite images, vast swathes of land, bright as day, every night of the year. The scale of this transformation is staggering. Consider this: global light pollution is increasing by about 2% per year. That might sound small, but compounded year after year, it is a sweeping change. The spread of LED lighting has only accelerated the process. Unlike older sodium or incandescent lights, LEDs are cheap to run, easy to install, and last for years. The result? More lights, brighter lights, lights left on all night. The world grows ever more luminous. But there's a twist, a turn in the story that is both triumphant and melancholy. As we have conquered darkness, we have also lost something essential. The night sky, once a source of wonder, has faded for much of humanity. The Milky Way, the great river of stars that our ancestors watched, named, and mythologized, is now invisible to about 1/3 of people on Earth. For billions, the sky is blank, empty, washed out by the relentless glow of cities. Think about what that means. For most of human history, the stars were a map, a calendar, a source of stories and dreams. Every culture, on every continent, looked up and found meaning in the darkness. Now, for many, that experience is gone, vanished, erased by the very lights that keep us safe. There's something both triumphant and melancholy in this. We have achieved what no other species could. We have made the night our own. We have built cities that never sleep, neighborhoods that shine through the deepest hours, homes that glow with warmth and security. But in doing so, we have lost the darkness itself. We have become strangers to the night. Let's walk slowly through the world we've built. Start with the city. Modern urban life is designed, quite literally, around our need for artificial light. Streets are lined with lamps spaced at regular intervals, casting overlapping circles of safety. Highways blaze with headlights and signage. Office towers and apartment blocks burn with thousands of bulbs, all night, every night. Even public parks, once places of shadow and mystery, are illuminated by security lighting, floodlights, decorative LEDs. The numbers are enormous. New York City alone maintains over 315,000 streetlights. Paris, the city of light, has more than 56,000. In Los Angeles, the total is over 220,000. Multiply that by thousands of cities, and you begin to grasp the scale. But it's not just the city. Suburbs, too, are aglow: porch lights, garage lamps, motion sensors, holiday decorations. Even in rural areas, the spread of artificial light is inexorable. Highways, big box stores, factories, and farms all add to the glow. There are now only a handful of places in the continental United States where you can find true, unpolluted darkness. A few remote deserts, some mountaintops, a scattering of protected reserves. Inside our homes, the story is the same. We layer light upon light: overhead fixtures, table lamps, under-cabinet LEDs, nightlights for children, reading lights by the bed. Many people never turn them all off. The result is a kind of perpetual twilight, a world where the rhythms of day and night are blurred, where darkness is only ever partial, temporary, easily banished with the flick of a switch. The design of our spaces reflects this obsession. Open floor plans, with few walls to block the spread of light. Windows that frame the city's glow or the neighbor's porch lights. Mirrors to bounce illumination into every corner. We have made our environments bright, not because we love the light itself, but because we fear the alternative: shadow, uncertainty, the things we cannot see. There is an irony here. The more we light the world, the more we remind ourselves of what we cannot do. Every lamp is a silent admission. We are not creatures of the night. But what is the cost of this conquest? What have we lost in gaining the power to banish darkness? The answer, as always, is complicated. Some losses are obvious: the fading of the stars, the vanishing of the Milky Way. The end of traditions, nighttime storytelling under the open sky, the navigation of seafarers by the stars, the rituals tied to lunar cycles and constellations. These are cultural losses, hard to measure, but deeply felt. Other losses are more subtle, hidden in the workings of our bodies and the fabric of the natural world. Consider sleep. Our biology is tuned to the cycles of light and dark. The hormone melatonin, which signals to the body that it is time to sleep, rises in response to darkness. Even a small amount of artificial light, especially the blue-rich glow of LEDs and screens, can suppress melatonin production, delay sleep, and reduce its quality. Studies have found that exposure to light at night is linked to a range of health issues: insomnia, obesity, depression, even increased risk for certain cancers. The evidence is sobering, if not yet fully understood. Here's something even more haunting. In 2016, a team of researchers published a study showing that children living in highly light-polluted cities went to sleep, on average, 30 to 45 minutes later than those in darker environments. Over a year, that adds up to more than 200 hours of lost sleep. The pattern repeats in adults. Those exposed to more nighttime illumination report shorter, more fragmented sleep, higher rates of mood disorders, and greater feelings of fatigue. The mystery deepens when we look at the wider world, at the ecosystems shaped by the rhythms of darkness. Many animals, from insects to birds to mammals, rely on the night for feeding, mating, migration. Artificial light disrupts these patterns. Moths, drawn to streetlights, die in staggering numbers. Some estimates suggest billions perish each year, with cascading effects on pollination and food webs. Sea turtles, guided by the moonlight, become lost on artificially lit beaches, their hatchlings wandering inland instead of toward the safety of the sea. Birds, confused by city glow, collide with buildings in vast numbers. New York City alone records over 100,000 such deaths each year. The loss of darkness is not just a human story. It is a planetary story. Some researchers argue that we are only beginning to understand the consequences. The rise of LED lighting has transformed the spectrum of nighttime illumination, shifting it toward blue wavelengths that are especially disruptive for both humans and wildlife. Unlike the warm, amber glow of old streetlights, LEDs are bright, harsh, and persistent. Their adoption has outpaced our ability to study their effects. Global surveys show that areas illuminated by LEDs experience much faster increases in sky glow, sometimes as much as 20% per year, in newly converted cities. Here's the thing. We are the first generation in history to live in near constant illumination. For all previous generations, darkness was a fact of life, a boundary drawn by the turning of the planet. Night was inescapable, a time for rest, for dreams, for vulnerability and renewal. Now darkness is a choice, a luxury, even a rarity. What does this mean for us? How does this shape our minds, our bodies, our societies? Some researchers think that the loss of darkness has contributed to rising rates of anxiety and mood disorders. The logic is simple. Our brains are wired for cycles, for the gentle oscillation between light and dark, action and rest. When this rhythm is broken, the body struggles to adapt. Sleep becomes lighter, more restless. Dreams become more fragmented. The sense of safety that comes with true night, the feeling of being enfolded, hidden, at peace, erodes. We become, in a subtle but persistent way, more vigilant, more restless, more awake. Others argue that the psychological impact is more complicated. For many, the glow of the city is a symbol of security, of progress, of human ingenuity. The lights reassure us that we are not alone, that help is near, that civilization endures. The darkness, by contrast, is a reminder of vulnerability, of isolation, of the dangers that once lurked beyond the firelight. In this view, our conquest of the night is a triumph to be celebrated, not mourned. The debate continues because the evidence is ambiguous. Some studies find strong links between exposure to artificial light and negative health outcomes. Others find little effect, or effects that are confounded by factors like noise, stress, or socioeconomic status. The honest answer is that we don't know, not yet, how deep the impact runs. But here's what's really strange. Even as we surround ourselves with light, the fear of darkness persists. It is stubborn, irrational, difficult to banish. Children ask for nightlights, cling to parents in the blackness. Adults avoid unlit streets, check closets and under beds, feel their hearts race in unfamiliar shadows. The old instincts are still with us, written in the wiring of our brains. Why is this? What purpose does fear serve, in a world where darkness is so easily defeated? Some researchers think that the fear is a kind of evolutionary echo, a leftover adaptation from a time when the night was truly dangerous. Like the craving for sugar, or the startle reflex, it persists even when the environment changes. Others argue that the fear is learned, shaped by stories and experiences, by culture as much as by biology. The answer is probably both. The fear of darkness is ancient, but it is also contemporary. It is a reminder of our limitations, of the fact that we are not and never were masters of the night. Yet, in another sense, we have become just that. Masters of the night, conquerors of darkness. And there is something both triumphant and melancholy in this. We have turned our greatest weakness into a kind of strength. We have built a world that compensates for our lost night vision, that makes up for our vulnerability with ingenuity, that transforms the darkness into just another space to be inhabited, explored, illuminated. But the price is real. The loss of darkness has consequences, many of which we are only beginning to understand. Let's return for a moment to the stars. Imagine standing in a remote place, perhaps a desert in Namibia, or the high mountains of Chile, or the deep forests of Canada. Here the sky is black, not gray. The Milky Way arches overhead, a river of light, dense with stars. You can see with your own eyes the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.5 million light-years away. You can feel in your bones the scale of the universe. For most of our history, this was the common experience of humanity. The stars were a constant presence, a source of stories, of navigation, of wonder. Now, for billions, they are gone. The night sky is empty. Astronomers call this phenomenon the loss of the night. It is not just a technical problem, but a cultural and psychological one. The stars connect us to something larger, something ancient and profound. Their absence is a kind of amnesia, a forgetting of our place in the cosmos. Some cultures have fought back. In the Canary Islands, laws restrict outdoor lighting to protect the dark sky. In parts of France, shop signs and public buildings must turn off lights after midnight. The International Dark Sky Association, founded in 1988, now counts over 130 certified dark sky parks and reserves around the world, places where darkness is preserved as a resource to be cherished and protected. These efforts are small compared to the scale of the problem, but they are reminders that darkness, too, is valuable. That it is not just an absence, but a presence, a space for dreams, for reflection, for connection with the natural world. There's something haunting about the speed of this transformation. In just a few generations, we have gone from a world lit only by fire and stars to one where darkness is almost extinct. The change is not just physical, but psychological, cultural, even spiritual. We have lost not only the ability to see in the dark, but the experience of darkness itself. And yet, adaptation is what makes us human. We have not stood still. We have invented, improvised, reimagined the night. We have found ways to make the world safer, brighter, more welcoming. Our cities shine as beacons of progress and possibility. Our homes are filled with the comforts of modern life. Here's something to wonder at. The very technologies that threaten the night also offer hope for its return. Smart lighting systems that dim when no one is present. Shielded fixtures that direct light downward, not up into the sky. LEDs tuned to warmer colors, less disruptive to sleep and wildlife. Community efforts to restore the stars, to bring back the lost darkness, even if only in small patches. The pattern repeats. We lose, we adapt, we invent, we remember, we try to recover what was lost. Not because we can return to the world of our ancestors, but because we sense, somewhere deep inside, that darkness is necessary. That it is part of what makes us whole. What then does it mean to live with lost night vision in the modern world? It means living with a paradox. We are creatures of the day, surrounded by a night we have conquered, but not truly understood. We long for safety and comfort, but we also long for wonder, for the mystery of the stars, the peace of true night, the gentle enfolding of darkness. And so, we build our cities brighter, our homes warmer, our nights shorter. We light every path, every room, every corner, but we also tell stories about the dark. We invent ghosts and monsters, we write poems about moonlit nights, we travel to the ends of the earth to see the stars as our ancestors did. There's something both triumphant and melancholy in this. We have gained so much and lost so much in the bargain. The honest answer is, we may never fully grasp what darkness meant to those who came before us. Their fears, their dreams, their awe at the night sky are only partly accessible to us now. But we can feel echoes. The unease that creeps in when the lights go out, the thrill of seeing the stars from a mountaintop, the comfort of a nightlight, the hush that falls when the city sleeps. These are reminders, faint but persistent, of our evolutionary story. And perhaps that is enough. To remember, even dimly, the world we lost, to wonder sometimes about what it meant to live in darkness, to accept, with peaceful humility, the trade-offs that made us who we are. And this brings us, gently, to the present moment. Here in the half-light of your room, you are living with the legacy of lost night vision. You are part of a story that began millions of years ago in the forests of ancient Africa, and that continues in every street lamp and glowing screen. As you listen, as you drift, notice the glow around you. Notice the absence of true darkness. Notice, too, the comfort it brings, the feeling of safety, of certainty, of being at home. But in the quiet spaces, in the moments between thoughts, you may also sense a kind of longing. A gentle melancholy for the darkness that is gone. A wonder at the ingenuity that brought us here. A peaceful acceptance of the paradox we inhabit. We are the children of the day, but the night is not truly lost. It waits for us at the edges of the world, in the spaces between the lights, in the dreams that come when we close our eyes. Perhaps tonight you will remember the stars. Perhaps you will feel the pull of the darkness, not as something to fear, but as something to cherish. A space for rest, for dreaming, for connection with the vastness of the cosmos. And so, as you settle into sleep, let yourself be carried by the rhythm of light and dark, of loss and adaptation, of fear and wonder. Let the glow of modern life remind you of where you came from, and the darkness remind you of what you still are. The story does not end here. In the next and final reflection, we'll ask what all of this means for who we are, for what we value, for how we might find balance between the worlds of light and darkness. For now, rest in the knowledge that you are part of an ancient, ongoing negotiation. A story of loss and triumph, of vulnerability and ingenuity, of darkness and illumination. Think about that for a moment. So here we are at the quiet edge of the story, looking back through the long corridors of time. It's tempting to see our loss of night vision as a flaw, a vulnerability left behind by evolution, a door closed forever on a world of shadows and silent possibility. But here's the thing. What we call loss was, in truth, a choice. Not a conscious decision made by a single ancestor, but a trade negotiated across thousands of generations. Our eyes, and the eyes of those who came before us, selected not for mastery of darkness, but for something far more subtle. We traded the night for color, the quiet of solitude for the warmth of connection. Picture this. About 30 million years ago, in the tangled forests of ancient Africa, our primate ancestors faced a pivotal crossroads. The night was full of predators, dangers lurking at every turn, but the day held its own mysteries, ripe fruit glinting in the sun, the shifting expressions of others in the troop, the delicate blush of a friend or foe. The evidence is written in the structure of our eyes. 3 types of cone cells, sensitive to wavelengths from about 420 to 560 nanometers, allowing us to see a vibrant spectrum of reds, greens, and blues. In exchange, our rod cells, those that sense the faintest light, dwindled in number. Compared to a nocturnal mammal, we have about 1/5 the rods per square millimeter of retina. We gave up the ability to see in starlight, but gained the power to read the world in daylight, and more importantly, to read each other. Think about what that means. Every time you look into another person's eyes, every time you catch the flicker of a smile, the flush of embarrassment, the glimmer of tears, you are using a system honed by millions of years of evolutionary bargaining. You are wielding the vision your ancestors chose, trading the ability to hunt in darkness for the chance to build relationships, to share intentions, to sense belonging. The faces we see are maps of emotion, and our vision is exquisitely tuned to them. Not because we lost something essential, but because we gained something extraordinary. We often fear the dark. We fill our homes with light. We invent myths to explain the shadows. We cluster together when night falls. But the darkness we fear is also the darkness we rest in. It is the same darkness that cradles us at the end of each day, inviting us to let go, to trust, to surrender, to sleep. Our vulnerability in the night became an invitation to gather close, to tell stories, to keep watch over each other. The flickering firelight, the shared hush of evening, the gentle cadence of voices murmured in the dark, these are the rituals that shaped our species. We did not conquer the night, we learned to meet it together. This is what makes our story so remarkable. The trade of night vision for color, of solitude for society, was not just an adaptation, it was the foundation of meaning. We became a species that found purpose not in the hunt, but in the gaze of another. Around 90% of our brain's visual cortex is dedicated to processing detail, color, and facial expression. Compare that to the sparse, utilitarian vision of those who remained in the dark. The answer is complicated, but the pattern is clear. Connection became our survival strategy. Every friendship, every alliance, every shared moment is a quiet echo of that ancient trade. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. You are part of this ongoing story. The eyes you close at night, the dreams you enter, the comfort you seek in the presence of others, all are shaped by choices made long before you were born. The story continues in every glance, every gesture, every act of trust. The darkness outside your window is the same darkness your ancestors faced on the savannah, and the same darkness that now welcomes you to rest. Whether you're in the heart of a bustling city in Europe, where the glow of streetlights testifies to our long struggle against the dark, or in the sweeping deserts of Australia, where starlight still reigns and the night feels endless, or somewhere in between, your story is part of a global tapestry. The human trade-off echoes from the Arctic Circle, where winter nights stretch for months, to the equator, where day and night chase each other in perfect rhythm. Across continents and cultures, we are united by this ancient negotiation, the eyes that chose connection over isolation. So as you settle in, know that you are not alone. You belong to a lineage that chose meaning over mere survival, connection over solitude, color and nuance over the safety of the shadows. The mystery does not end here. It lingers in every sunrise, every whispered goodnight, every dream that flickers behind your eyelids. Let these mysteries follow you gently into sleep. Trust in the darkness that cradles you, and the vision that connects you to others. You are part of a story, both haunting and beautiful. A story that began in the loss of night, and blossomed into the world we share. Sleep well.